This is the third of our series on emancipatory perspectives on madness. I love it. I tell you what, as I've been reading this book, I'm seeing layers that I missed the first time. I probably read it 4 years ago. And this time I have the honor of being joined by Laura, and we're going to be exploring chapter 3, Transpersonal Enactments and the Teleology of Paranoia. And so thanks for being here, Laura.
Thank you, Josh. I so appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and discuss the chapter and all of the wonderful different concepts in the book.
There's so many of those. There's so many different concepts. And this chapter is actually written by Robin and Marie. And so I think as I read it 4 years ago, I kind of the only thing that stood out was the story of Anja at the end, which we're going to come back to. But as I reread it now, I see, oh my word, I've been pointing at all of this stuff in neurodiversity gifts for so long, and now it kind of is right there in front of my face. So just for you guys who haven't read the book or the chapter, I want to give you guys a quick little overview. Um, Transpersonal enactments and the teleology of paranoia. So one of the goals here is to bring these powerful concepts down from the ivory towers into the hands of the peers and to translate these concepts into stories and ways to understand it. And what they're saying is that transpersonal, there's something that goes beyond the personal. It's talking about the inner world is not only stuck in our heads, but actually it affects the outer world. It does talk about mysticism and how our thoughts are actually creating change within the external world. Teleology means it has a purpose, that paranoia has a purpose, it has a direction and a leading. And so the chapter talks about the disenchantment of the world. I mean, you check all like the underlines that I've been doing. And it talks about how within synchronicities or those divine coincidences, according to Jung, is the germ of transformation, not only within the patient, but within the therapist as well, that you're both tapping into something larger, this unconscious interaction that starts to unfold that reveals things about maybe both of your shared heritage. And then it comes to the story of Anja at the end here, which to summarize is basically Anja grew up on Native American lands, but she's from Northern Europe and her peoples were pushed out of their lands as well, and their culture was held back from them. And so when they came to America, that sort of theme started coming up in Anja's family through her father. They were living on Native American lands, and the father became paranoid that the government was trying to steal their land. And so he was wandering around at night with flashlights, and they were kind of hearing ghosts. The whole family was believing it for a while. And then as Anja grew up and went out into the outer world, that family coherence wasn't there to keep them as a coherent narrative, like us versus the world. And so she stopped believing it a little bit. Both her and her father fell into addiction, her into heroin and the father into alcoholism. And there was violence, domestic violence erupting in the house until later on, the father's paranoid delusions about the land trying to be taken actually ended up coming true. And the government tried to take their land. This brought Anja and the family back into their little cohesive whole, and they rallied the community and they fought against the land being taken. And this healed both Anja's addiction to heroin, the father's addiction to alcohol, the domestic violence, and the coherence of the family. They ended up losing the land, but they saved their heritage in a way. They saved their family system. And so what they're saying is that these patterns can come down through the generations and they're unconscious. We don't quite know why we're acting them out, but they need to find their resolution and their kind of enactment within space-time to be registered as a traumatic event. And when that happens, there can be a healing that goes back through the genetic line. There's a line in the book that says that madness is the result of a person's attempt to heal others that's been thwarted. The dad was trying to heal the family, trying to heal his trauma, but he wasn't able to do it. And so it didn't go as well until ultimately they did end up healing it. So it could be a pre-configuration. It's calling, it's pointing out to something in the future that can be prophetic, even though the surrounding culture didn't get it. So I know that Anja's story resonated with you, Laura. You've had some really fascinating thoughts about how this even ties into theology and the sacrificial lamb and identified patient syndrome and all of that. What are your thoughts about the chapter and about Anja's story?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for what a great overview you just provided everybody, including me. I was like,
Hey.
really, really love the way you just summarized all of that. Um, I will say that uh, as a student and someone who really views myself as just getting started in the process of learning how um, intertwined spirituality is with learning different elements of psychology and definitions. I just actually spend a lot of time looking things up, and I felt really humbled by that process, and I learned a lot. The definition of coherency to me was something that I kind of spent a little time on, and I really it resonated for me to think of coherency as being logical, consistent, and the quality of forming a unified whole. And so, in addressing that, I started thinking about how paranoid hallucinations, as they're defined in this case, seemingly stem from a fierce desire to protect and safeguard that land that the family was living on, which seemed very logical and consistent, and arguably not paranoid at all if you look at things through a wider lens, as the authors do. Considering the historical and well documented accounts of the atrocities committed against Native Americans, who had also lived on that very same land and had been driven from it generations before, and the internal need to protect the family property was reinforced by the family's own ancestral heritage, as you pointed out, the Sami heritage, which bore similar themes of systemic persecution, mistreatment, and displacement. So, acknowledging this as a root cause of Anja's family behavioral patterns had a quality of forming a unified whole to it, providing coherency and bringing old unaddressed wounds to the surface in ways that could ultimately lead to their healing.
Yes, it's
So
like,
that was,
why did they end up settling there? It's like they could have settled anywhere, but
I know,
they came from Northern Europe, were kicked out of their land, and ended up settling on other land where people had also been kicked out. Are the circumstances of our life
yeah.
conspiring, if you will, to help us heal and to reconfront the things that have happened in the past so that we can digest them, so we can transmute them into this wisdom? So I think that the teleology, that there's a purpose to these things and that there's a purpose to psychosis, paranoia, madness. So what do you think about all of that?
Oh, I absolutely do think there's a purpose to it. I think that um, this stuff is seen as being cyclical, right?
Yeah.
And you can even think of how people will say, well, we have a hereditary predisposition to alcoholism or that kind of thing. It's like, well, what is that? Is that actually inherited as a gene, or is that coming through from trauma, ancestral trauma that needs to be identified and needs to be worked on in order to rise above it and stop those cycles of abuse.
Yeah, right. So it's like even if one person in the family is the identified patient, is the alcoholic,
Mhm.
that pattern probably repeated itself in the previous generation and in the
Yeah.
previous generation. And so is that person the problem, or is that person showing us the solution to our problem? So is the identified patient maybe enacting something in all of our unconscious? And it's not that we need to fix that person, but it's really interesting what they're talking about almost stepping into the person's madness with them. We have this idea that we're supposed to correct their madness. Oh, well, they're wrong and we need to try to correct them. But if it's an ecosystem, maybe this aspect of the ecosystem is trying to change us in a good way too. And so this alcoholism or the identified patient, it might be the system's way of trying to heal itself. And so if we don't fight it or push that system out, but we learn how to allow that story to come out, then maybe we can not only heal our current time, but we can heal the future generations too. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes backwards and almost heals the previous generation too, because space-time isn't linear. So I like what you're saying there, that it's not only our problem, but these are repeated things that happen over and over in each generation.
Right, right. They really are. And, I think that until there's somebody who comes along and is highly sensitive, somebody who identifies as being maybe at first just initially self-conscious and can't figure out why, but like doesn't quite fit in, and it's not normalized within them just to be living in a family dynamic that's full of different, maybe unhealthy behavioral patterns, and can't metabolize that easily. That those people have been chosen to become a disruptor or agent of change for a reason. And so they might be thought of as an identified patient or the source of all the family's problems, when in fact they're there to be a catalyst of change.
What a paradigm shift. What a paradigm shift for a person's identity. They think, oh,
Yeah,
I'm the broken one. Oh, look at my brothers. They're doing so well.
yeah,
Actually, maybe you're the catalyst for change. Maybe you're the spark, the thing that's going to really not only take your generation to new heights, but the next generation too. I
yeah,
think what they were saying about in the book about the definition of madness being unable to separate self and other. There's this dissolution between self and other. And we think, well, that's a problem in the West because clearly I'm here and you're there. But maybe that's only on one level. That's only on the conscious level. On the subconscious level, we're connected to Jung's collective unconscious. We're actually all the same sort of organism. We share the same heritage. And so when the person is mad and they're losing the line between self and other, are they speaking to this bigger picture? And is there some real kind of healing potential in that? And so, like, instead of isolating that person, giving them the ability to tell a story or to step into their own narrative could provide real healing. It's like the archetypes in the Old Testament were pointing towards what was going to happen in the New Testament. And so, while they were trying to make their way towards the promised land, they had to go around and around the mountain for years, 40 years, when it was actually only an 11-day journey, because they needed to come to some sort of realization about who they were. They're not actually people of slavery. They're not the people of Egypt, but there's an identity shift with God's chosen people. And actually, a
yeah.
lot of that generation had to die off because maybe they were too entrenched in these old school ideas. But then we can find our way together into the promised land. So maybe we are a collective, maybe the person who seems to be losing the boundary dissolutions between themselves and others is pointing towards this larger collective, this new identity that we can step into and then find our way towards our promised land. What do you think about the parallel in this identified patient syndrome and the monotheistic traditions like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, whether it's the sacrificial lamb or these kind of stories that happen over and over?
Oh gosh, I think that there's a ton of similarity there. We see these archetypes, right, throughout literature and throughout certainly throughout theology that point to these people who come forward who are the most broken amongst us, right? The most hurting, the most enslaved, the people who have like the biggest issues, facing those issues head on and having to work through those issues and then becoming strengthened by that walk through that wilderness of pain and suffering, having all of that kind of shed from them, and then rising up with the recognition that someone needs to step forward, and that the greatest leaders are actually the leaders who don't want to be leaders,
Yeah.
who who probably feel like they have imposter syndrome and don't really have an interest in leadership because they have the purest hearts. And so, they're not in it for any other reason than knowing that these paradigms that are unhealthy and the ancestral trauma, whatever is rooted, whatever is rooting them to a lot of suffering, needs to be broken. And so that's why they come forward. So yeah, and thinking about the different archetypes that are really based in theology and in religious tradition. You've got the redeemer, you've got the sacrificial lamb, as you mentioned, you've got also like the reluctant hero. I kind of saw all of that, the warrior, like described as a warrior of light, if you want to put a more positive spin on it. Like I really feel like all of these can be found in Anja and her father's story and that family story. So especially with like when I see Anja's father I think of him as a reluctant hero more than anything, because he was initially so, trapped in his fear, and really couldn't do anything about it. And then just like returned to, the escapism of substance abuse and like escalating anger issues and all of that, which is so human, right? It's like all the same stuff that like is done over and over throughout history. Is these patterns are repeated until you have maybe an outside enemy or like something to focus on, like the government threatening to take that land, and in a real way when in the story they were planning to tear down some cottages that had been built for the community. And interestingly, those cottages that they were going to demolish were originally built to house sick people. So I thought that aspect was also interesting because, like, the sick houses needed to come down, even though they were clinging to the community was clinging to them. But in their demolition, they were able to rebuild, family structure that would be healthier and based on, recognition that, old habits and paradigms of addiction and abuse, that kind of cyclical thing needed to come to an end.
Wow, how deep is that? Yeah, and if we tie it to the reluctant hero archetype, if we think about Moses, he did not
Yeah,
want to go and
yeah,
set his people free. He was like, but I stutter, I can't talk well. And yet it was that humility. He first maybe had to like learn humility after 40 years in the desert.
yeah,
After being a prince, he had to just tend sheep for 40 years. But then he
yeah,
did heed that call to adventure. He went back to Pharaoh and said, set my people free. So they
yeah,
were in these sick houses. They were in the ropes of slavery, but they kind of wanted that. It's like sort of institutionalization where they wanted those barriers. Back when they found actual freedom, they're like, oh, we want to go back to slavery. And so that had to be demolished, and it actually took a while to demolish that. But in
right,
that demolition was the discovery of a new identity, and that reluctant hero was the spokesperson for a whole generational shift, which allowed the promise of God to come not only to the Israelites, but to the Egyptians, the very enslaving people too. So interesting how you say that there needed to be like this outside force that they fought against in Anja's family. It was the government, and that rallied them together. What is that outside force that could allow us to rally together? And here, maybe one example could be they say that it's the war on imagination. They say
mm,
through secular psychology and the scientism paradigm, there's a war on imagination, which
mm,
de-enchants the world. The world always used to be filled with magic and purpose and wonder. And now, through the war on imagination, that's allowed for capitalism to proliferate and colonialism. And so maybe we can rally for imagination. We're for imagination, this dissolution between the inner world and the outer world. Or I don't know, what do you think? What do you think? Is there something necessary that we need to rally against?
I do think that it does help to have some type of common, enemy, if you will. And I think that is maybe an archaic way of looking at, our evolutionary growth, and something that needs to be necessitated in order to achieve that growth. But historically speaking, having something outside of a community or family does bond that family or community despite all their differences, in ways that can really be cathartic and healing for them. It's not maybe necessarily the healthiest way to do it, but I do think that being able to focus all of their aggressions and their tensions, as the authors in the book talked about, on an outside entity, and in this case it would be like the government for the example in the book. um, it really does help to be able to overcome the differences and focus on what they have in common, and unite people ultimately.
That's it. Yeah. Maybe us lived experiences, we can
Mhm.
unite under not allowing the disenchantment to come into our world. We're not going to let the world be disenchanted by the biomedical paradigm or whatever. There's definitely some good things that we can grab from that, but we're not going to say that the world is just void and meaningless and our minds are just malfunctioning. So we can rebel against that narrative. I know you're big into story, you're big into narrative. Were there any stories that came to mind as you were reading this, or what do you think about the power of story to transform?
Yeah, oh my gosh, the power of story to transform is huge in my life. And as a writer and a published author who has a line of children's books, I really love my children's books, but I'm also a poet. And so I have in this book, it's a compilation of maybe I think 75 poems written over a span of about 30 years, kind of mirroring the process of my own transformative journey and of awakening. So, this poem that I am going to read right now, kind of feel compelled to read, is called Sherpa in the Mirror. So I'll put on my glasses that are literally taped on the side. They just broke this morning. So I literally scotch taped them together. So this will look really fashionable, I'm sure. But
Piecemeal lenses. We're piecemealing our lenses right
I
now
know,
together.
literally, what a
Yeah.
nerd, like
But
seriously.
I think it's cool.
Okay, so Sherpa in the Mirror. I turn and face my Sherpa, the one who stares back each morning, the round shouldered woman who bears and hauls this heavy body through the millstone of life. There are new circles beneath her eyes. She rarely gets much sleep. Silently, her aggrieved reflection accuses me of not trying hard enough. I see her point, feel her point, sear beneath fiery muscles and joints. Although she tries to bear the burden, she's become aware her earthly existence is only the base camp. Working against the weight of regret, she must continue to trek forward, dragging the murky cosmos of her inner life dutifully along. There is no choice for her, cast to carry human frailty like an overfilled pot, the bundle of nerves inside in a constant state of shock, sensing worlds she cannot see. There is only choice for me, the altered mind, allowed to fight or flee, slipping in and out of dreams, easily distracted, making lists of all that must be packed and hauled up each mountain of a day. Touching the mirror, I watch her sigh and pray God keeps fueling her with purpose until she is free.
Wow. Oh, God. I'm trying. Yes,
Nice,
a thumbs
nice.
up as the thumbs up ascends. That is really beautifully said, and how hard the battle can be. It reminds me of like the Greek myth of Sisyphus pushing the thing up the hill every day just to have it roll down. But there is this pathway of ascent up a mountain. And we do have these guides, whether it's our community, whether it's the unseen spiritual world, whether it's
Yeah.
God and the cosmos. So I love how you express that so honestly. And also there's this hope in it that you are actually ascending and that there's a new world that is coming into clarity. With even with our broken glasses, there's a new world that's coming into clarity. Thanks for
Thank you,
sharing, Ash, for
Joshua.
that. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, after my own initial awakening process that really felt to me like a conscious calling on my life to go deeper with my faith and to also recognize the patterns of brokenness and maybe the just I'll say unhealthy familial patterns in my own family. It really helped me a whole lot to feel that I could glean like these archetypes from it and see these patterns throughout history and apply it to kind of something greater that kind of like weaves itself throughout all of time and space, um, and really in this mystical way be able to bring the cosmos into our daily life, in a way that allows us to see how multidimensional we are as earthlings here, like that these vessels that are walking around eating sandwiches and having coffee and hanging out, really are that we are really spirits and in these vessels that are temporary. And so yeah, I think there's just so many ways that you can connect like this story with the stories of theology, and also with literature and with just timeless concepts of loss, of of overcoming obstacles, of working through to a place of redemption and transformation and atonement. And these are different elements that we all work on a little bit differently, but they all have very universal themes to them.
They do, so we're all part of the same story. It's
Yeah.
working itself out in our different lives. We have this cosmic connection. I love how
Yeah.
you said that, and how we're multidimensional beings. And so they say or that people think madness is losing the line between self and other. And they think madness is when we're losing the line between the different dimensions. So, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm cruising around eating sandwiches. Clearly, I am in a physical dimension. I can feel that. I can feel my body in the chair. But
Right.
clearly, I'm in another dimension, call it the mental dimension, which is where these thoughts are happening. And at the same time, I'm in the imagination dimension. There's a part of me that's having dreams right now. And then I'm in the spiritual dimension too. And so, are we
Yeah.
bringing these other stories into a symphony? Whereas we've only been focusing on the piano line,
Yeah.
and we're like, well, why is all this other stuff making us feel weird? It's because we've locked out the bass. We've forgotten those different levels and all the harmonies. So I think it's awesome that we can start to tell these multidimensional stories, and who better to do that than those who've experienced this stuff, those who've actually had an encounter with the enchanted nature of reality. So I love it. I love this chapter. I love the book. I love these conversations. I think this is just the start of a paradigm shift. I think reductive materialism's had its day, and we're going to step into something new. But just want
Yeah.
to end it with any final thoughts that you had, anything that stood out, any kind of concluding comments you want to make here.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for summarizing that so beautifully. You're so um, eloquent and with your words, and I'm still just kind of learning to be more able to express these things with a level of comfort.
Oh, yes, so good with words.
Well, I
The
appreciate you
linguistic
saying
maestro.
no, but I will say my own journey has really made me very acutely aware of really what you were just talking about, learning to walk in um, two dimensions or worlds, if you will, at once, right? Where
Yeah.
you're honoring the ascension of your consciousness and your place in the collective consciousness,
Mm.
and your place as someone who is recognizing that we are all part of something greater,
Yeah.
and even being able to feel and sense that and know that it's not just even a belief anymore, it's really a knowledge, and then coming back down into this world and being able to walk amongst people who by and large are still kind of unaware of that and are just waking up to that truth, um, and kind of having that work together in a way that becomes more synchronized, and gaining a better understanding of it creates a sense of inner peace, um, as you continue to move forward. But it requires being messy. It requires being okay with looking a bit crazy sometimes, because you're trying to work through what really are unhealthy systemic issues that have plagued society, for probably as long as humanity's been in existence. So trying to work through all of that, we have to give ourselves space and grace, and also others space and grace, to experience the process, not just the highs and the kind of the fun elements of that, the learning that we are part of something greater is really kind of a cool thing to learn, but also to allow things to come up and process it, and recognize that in peeling back those layers, there's going to be a little bit of pain because dynamics need to change, So, um, and then finally, I would just say that, like, in really focusing on what these authors had to say so well uh, about Anja's story and Anja's father's story. I love thinking of him primarily as like the role of the redeemer, because he obviously caused his family a whole lot of pain and suffering, but ultimately he redeemed himself by rising up to confront the oppressive overreach of the government, in a way that unified and healed and strengthened his family and community bonds, and gave him a sense of purpose that helped him also confront and end the cycle of alcoholism and abuse in his family, inspiring his daughter, encouraging his daughter to get clean as well. They all got clean. And so, to your earlier point about those old cottages falling, being demolished, it's really worth noting that in their place, these family dynamics were built in much healthier ways, thereby undertaking that divinely assigned work of healing the ancestral trauma that needed to be healed. And to me, that is like a really beautiful story that's both really very relatable and full of redemption and hope.
Ah, that's beautiful right there. I love that. Okay, so the actual structures, this physical thing in this dimension had to fall so
Yeah.
that the community structures could emerge. It makes me think about that archetype of the Redeemer, the Christ figure who came down, and while his body had to fall, the physical temple was no longer the dimension that it happened. That had to fall so that the Holy Spirit could come and unite us all in this in the one language and this unified vision of teleology heading towards this vision and this future. And how powerful is that? It's a talk about having one foot in the unseen dimension, which is what Carl Jung recommends, having one foot in the unseen dimension and one foot here. We have to be grounded while transcending the grounding. That's what Jesus did. Fully
Yeah.
God, fully human, the Logos incarnate into flesh, the story, the word, the logic, the incarnated into flesh to allow us to heal Adam's wounds. And it's not that Adam happened one time in time and space. Adam is what's happening in all of us. It's that sin principle in all of us. So I think it's
Right.
pointing towards a larger teleology that brings together world religion understanding, psychology. Psychology means the study of the soul. We're bringing psychology and spirituality back into unison. And what a cool adventure to be on
What
with
a
you,
great
Laura.
adventure to be on. What a great adventure to be on. And what is really just I just want to leave this last thought that there's no one on this whole planet who could not participate in that process.
Yeah.
There's no one too lost, too broken, too messy, too far gone, too dark, if you will, who could not experience that redemptive, transformative inner healing in ways that would allow them to rise up and become the hero of not only their own story, but of a greater story that we all share.
So
So
cool. It's Anja's
powerful.
father. God loves to use the broken and the least of these to shame the strong and then the wise ones. And so Anja's father became this hero to rise up and transmute his family suffering. And that's what we're all in. We're all in the story together, guys. And so like we need you and we need your unique instrument to play the symphony. So go on and play that symphony, Laura. Thank you for your mind and your heart. And I look forward to more of these kinds of conversations. God
Thank
bless
you
you.
so very much. God bless you, Josh, and may your continued journey be one of love, light, and liberty.
Yes. Thank you, Lord, for this adventure.
Take
Peace.
care. Bye.
How do
Oh.
you?